Hello, everybody. My name is Adam Thorne, and welcome to the Australian Aviation podcast. You join me as we record this on Tuesday afternoon. We are just 2 days away, or 1 day away, from the Australian Aviation Summit. It's coming very soon, which we've been working tirelessly on for the past few months. I am joined by my co-host, Elon Musk superfan, Jake Nelson. Jake, how are you?
Well, I'm lamenting the loss of our screen.
Adam. It's gone.
We came in here looking for the screen, and we just found some nameless goo on the floor and a trail leading into the vents. So we can only conclude what has happened to the screen.
Is this the Dread Enoch or the or Jordan the Great?
No, it's definitely the Dread Enoch.
The Dread Enoch.
I think the Dread Enoch has taken our screen to. I'd hesitate to call it a man cave because it's never been verified what manner of creature the Dread Enoch is. Could be some kind of beast cave.
Yes.
But regardless, whatever cave that the Dread Enoch has, our screen is now in it.
It has gone. And I'd imagine, presumably, the Dread Enoch mostly likes, gorging on raw human flesh. But in between that, you do want to watch TV. And there are some good series, I'm sure. I think I've heard from the vents, Bridgerton. Right. Yeah, on Netflix. Yeah. Is there a reason why the Bridgerton?
You'd really have to ask the Dread Enoch, and I wouldn't.
So you're telling me the Dread Enoch is into English period dramas? I like that. I think that's a good,
he's so relatable.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what to say to that. Right, let's talk. Let's do a plug for the Australian Aviation Summit. So we're recording this on Tuesday. It'll probably come out on Wednesday. So you have to be quick. But you can still buy your tickets. I'll tell you the email address, the web address. You'll never remember it. Just go on Google, Australian Aviation Summit. It will come up. It is taking place on Thursday. That is the 29th of August this week at the Star in Sydney. Come along, and we have everyone who's anyone almost is there.
And I will be there as well.
And we'll get to you. Do you remember the thing we did last time? We go, maybe we do that again. We've got Christian Bennett, Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Virgin Australia. We've got Dr. Kimberly Camras, the Regional Lead for Sustainability at Boeing. We've got Paul Chase, the Chief Executive of Leidos Australia. Yeah, we've got Simon Hickey, the Chief Executive Officer of Western Sydney International, which only this week we had a big news story that we're going to talk about in a minute. We've got Captain Deborah Laurie, Aviation Royalty, the first female airliner pilot in Australia. We've got Emily McMillan from the TWU. We've got Ryan McMahon from Aviation Australia. We've got Rob Sharp, the interim CEO of Air Services Australia. We've got Google Wing. We've got Google. We've got Jesse Suskin and many, many, many more people, including Jake Nelson, who's going to be moderating some panels. So this is your last chance. You can't come next week because it would have been over. So go on there, buy a ticket. You can listen to all the panels, and then in the evening, if your day wasn't already good enough, we've got the Australian Aviation Awards. We'll be crowning the best and brightest in the industry. Even if you are not a finalist, you can still come along. There's like a fancy pants meal, wine. We've got a compere, got a comedian doing some jokes. You get loads of time in between them handing out the awards to go and chat and what have you. Come along. It'll be good fun, as well as, being a good business opportunity and all that.
It'll be a fantastic summit, fantastic night. We've got so many people registered, so many people coming as guests, and it's going to be I think a new at the dawn of a new era for the Australian aviation sector. Like the era in which we have an Australian aviation summit, as opposed to the one before where we didn't.
Do you think this is going to be as consequential as the introduction of a jet engine?
I think so, Adam.
Yes.
I think this is the 707 of our time. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that's Jake Nelson. You've got to go along with what he says. So yeah, basically,
You've heard it here first. Adam has admitted you have to go along with what I say. Yeah. Adam has admitted I'm always right.
We can, usually, to be fair, very rarely.
No backsies. No take backsies.
No backsies. It's just like 13-year-olds in a playground. Anyway, Australian Aviation Summit. Go on Google, tap it in, buy a ticket. We'll see you on Thursday. Right, we should probably now talk about the news, and we've not actually recorded.
We've had a very nice email. We've had a very nice email from our good friend, fan of the show, Rob Lee in Canberra. He says, "Hello, Adam." Yeah,
wow, there you go.
I'm here too sometimes. I've recently entered the world of the Australian Aviation podcast. Thank you for conducting the interviews in a professional and insightful manner. All too often the podcast medium fails to deliver meaningful content. My involvement with the aviation industry is now over, but I remain interested in its evolution and trends. Trivia not so much. The people and topics you bring to the microphone provide me with a variety of stimulating and thoughtful listening and have motivated me to maintain links with the industry. So that's great.
That's really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you want to send us a nice email, we would very much appreciate it. We usually get hate mail and abuse, which we wouldn't be able to read out on the show. So if you do want to say something nice, it's always very appreciated.
We love hearing nice things about ourselves.
We do.
We crave external validation.
Oh, absolutely. Right, we will talk now about the news. And we haven't actually recorded one of these shows, I think, in a few weeks, Jake was saying earlier, at which point there's been lots of big news stories. Let's start with the news story this week, or the biggest story of the week, which is the release of the Aviation White Paper. So basically, this is the idea that a year ago, or 9 months ago, the government released a green paper, and basically this green paper was going to outline a kind of way forward for the industry till 2050, as well as potentially unveiling kind of new kind of legislation or benefits to passengers, etc. And they released the green paper, which was kind of an outline of what they were thinking of doing, and then they invited industry to give their feedback, and now they've come back with their final report. Jake, talk us through what are the kind of the big announcements or the big highlights of this.
I think chief among them, the one that's getting a whole lot of attention, and it was as well something that the government was looking to promote in the white paper was these new consumer protections. So they've announced that they're going to be putting forward an aviation industry ombuds scheme. So there's going to be an independent ombudsperson to handle consumer complaints and disputes. Catherine King has the Transport Minister has kind of been very clear. This industry-funded Airline Customer Advocate, which has been around since I think the early 2010s, from back when Alba was Transport Minister, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this Airline Customer Advocate, she says, it hasn't made enough progress in fixing, consumer complaints and refunds requests. She said, quote, "Too many Australians have been left out to dry when flights are cancelled or disrupted, and it's impossibly complex to get a refund or even contact a company representative. Customers deserve to get their money back if they are owed it, full stop. It is time to take strong action to protect consumer rights with an aviation industry ombud scheme and a charter of customer rights." So there's going to be this it's setting out what customers can have the right to get from the aviation industry. This Airline Customer Advocate has it's widely been kind of criticised as being ineffectual. There was a story in the ABC the other year. It won a Shonky Award back in 2021.
I remember covering
the Shonky
that.
Award. Yeah, it was labelled a Shonky imposter. Rosie Thomas from Choice has said that it works like a post box forwarding complaints to the airlines without any power to make any decisions about complaints. So the Aviation Consumer Advocate, Catherine King is basically seeming to say this industry-run scheme is not up to the job. The government is now needing to step in and guarantee some consumer protections. So they want to, this ombudsman will deliver, quote, accessible, independent, fair and accountable dispute resolution. It will direct airlines and airports on consumer remedies. It will issue guidance on obligations to customers. It will report on airline and airport conduct. It will also refer misconduct for investigation and enforcement.
So what this means basically is, and what you were saying before, is the days of an airline basically being able to ignore you are gone, because now there is an independent third party that can force things along.
Exactly. And there's, plans as well to better enforce refunds for flights that are disrupted, cancelled or unreasonably delayed. And, in probably many cases, these refunds will have to be given in cash or in the original payment method, rather than with flight vouchers. And this is part as well of this Charter of Customer Rights. So there's going to be, what is an acceptable time for a refund to be provided? What is an unreasonable delay? What reasons for disruptions are within an airline's control? There needs to be, accessible and timely communication with passengers. It will also look at other obligations that airlines have to passengers that are hit by disruptions, including alternative travel arrangements. So this whole ombuds scheme, there's an interim person being appointed. With the legislation is going to be put in next year. There's going to be a consultation period until October, and it's expected to be fully up and running by 2026. So according to the government, airlines will have to show cause. They will have to report reasons for delays and cancellations as part of their regular reporting to the government, and the ombudsperson will be able to request additional information on specific flights. So, at least from part of this reading, I think it stops short of like pay on delay schemes that we see, like where airlines have to compensate passengers over and above the value of their ticket if their flight gets delayed. So I'm not seeing anything about that in the white paper, though. If I've missed it, please let me know. But it's definitely it's kind of making it clear that the government has had a kind of a gutful of the industry regulating itself, and it's stepping in a bit more.
Yeah. It's very interesting what you said there about airlines will now have to, every time there's a significant delay or cancellation, they have to give a reason why. It has to be documented. So there's been all of this kerfuffle, great word, about apparent slot hoarding by Qantas and Virgin. And so the accusation is that the big airlines basically kind of squat on their kind of plum takeoff time slots, and they can do this because they're allowed to cancel 1 in 5 flights and still keep that slot forever and ever and ever, which effectively blocks out smaller airlines. Now, obviously, this is what the smaller airlines, or what Bonza and Rex were accusing the larger airlines of. This is kind of what Sydney Airport's been accusing the larger airlines of. The larger airlines, from the other side of things, said that's just not the case. If we cancel a flight, or if a flight's delayed, we're not doing that on purpose. That is something outside of our control. Now, one of the reasons those accusations have been made is that at the moment there's no formal kind of process of reporting exactly why a delay or a cancellation happens. So it's very, very hard to actually inspect that. By doing this will also hold the industry to account a lot more too. They will actually have to explain why. The other thing I find quite fascinating about this is if we go back to a story which was now, a year or so ago, where Qantas were accused over these ghost flights, which is effectively that you were buying tickets for a flight that was actually already cancelled or was already not going to happen when you bought them. Qantas' initial argument before they rode back under a new CEO, their initial argument was that you never really buy a ticket expecting it to leave exactly at that time. You buy, what do they call it, a bundle of contractual rights.
Yeah, a bundle of rights. I'm looking for the exact, a bundle of contractual rights. It's exactly right. You buy a bundle of rights that says, we're going to get you to your destination at approximately the right time that you wanted. Your purchase doesn't guarantee you this specific seat on this specific flight, or
But so what Qantas' argument was that you there's never a guarantee of you going on time, so we'll just do our best to get you there roughly. And so what this announcement in the white paper does, it makes a mockery of that. It's basically saying that argument is wrong. That if you buy a ticket, you buy that ticket expecting the plane to leave at that time, but knowing there is something outside of your control that could stop it. But you still buy expecting that that's what you're going to get. So it's very much toughened up the rules here, and it's putting the onus on airlines to deliver. I think this is a very good move. Like Jake says there, it doesn't appear to go as far as, I think there's the scheme in the EU, which is very generous. But at the same time, it is a significant step. I'm not particularly political in terms of the Labour and Libs and all of this kind of stuff. But you've got to say the government has shown an interest in aviation in a way that arguably the last federal government hadn't. They've put a lot of time and effort and thought into this, and it feels that they're actually coming back with concrete proposals.
Well, I think
and things are going to change.
I think as well, the last white paper was put forward under a Labour government. I think it was Aviation. I'm just looking it up now. But it was something like 2011. Yeah, so there was the National Aviation Policy White Paper back in 2009, and that was set out under back when Anthony Albanese was the transport minister. So I don't know if we've had an aviation white paper since then.
Which, given that is an awful long time ago, the industry's radically different now to what it was back then. Also, you've obviously got this whole new world of electric aircraft possibly coming, a push towards sustainability.
Advanced air mobility.
Yeah, these were concepts that just were not a thing back then. So it clearly was necessary to be done.
Another thing that the aviation white paper has put forward, and another thing that the government was pointing to push front and center was disability protections, because they have they want to improve accessibility in both planes and airports with these new standards. So they want new aviation specific disability standards. They want airlines and airports to coordinate disability assistance and talk more to each other. They want plans for airport development to detail disability access. They want airlines to offer a passenger assistance profile, so passengers can fill in their accessibility needs in this profile and list their accessibility requirements, and they'll be available to the airlines in future bookings. Catherine King again said passengers with disabilities have had to endure, quote, poor service, inaccessible designs and rules that limit their travel options. She said, through our consultation, we heard clearly that the treatment of people with disability by the airlines and airports is not good enough. People have been left stranded on planes, forced to return to their departure port, or had to put up with poor treatment due to a lack of access to appropriate facilities at their destination. One thing that she's pointed to is there's limits to number of wheelchairs allowed on a plane. She said, if there's no safety reason, there's absolutely no excuse for airlines to be limiting the number of people who need wheelchairs or have mobility issues. And Social Services Minister Amanda Rishworth has also said that, or has also hinted that the government might be looking to improve these remedies for damage to accessibility devices such as wheelchairs. Because I think particularly in America, we've been hearing a few stories here and there about, passengers' wheelchairs getting damaged on flights. Those are expensive.
Yeah.
Wheelchairs are expensive. And so Amanda Rishworth has said, quote, they have a right to fair treatment and to compensation when their essential equipment is damaged or destroyed. So those are a couple of the big things from the aviation white paper. In terms of competition settings, I think that the government, especially at Sydney, is looking to push forward mostly with the recommendations in the Harris Review. But I think there's sort of hints that there might be re-examination of these use it or lose it 80-20 rules. If the Productivity Commission or if other agencies kind of deem it necessary. So
again, it just feels like stuff's happening.
Stuff is happening.
Okay, welcome back. So we were talking there about the white paper, about improvement for those people that have disabilities, potentially opening up slot management, and kind of more rights for consumers. And obviously the last kind of big story of a few weeks ago was Rex, which are currently in administration due to the apparent failure of their capital city 737 flights. Jake, we've been away for a few weeks. What's kind of the latest update on this?
There's been quite a lot on Rex over the past couple of weeks. So, for example, the Australian Federal Police was apparently called in over allegations that former executive chairman Lim Kim Hai was illegally recording the last board meeting before Rex went into administration. Palace intrigue at Rex. We've got we've also got these questions around. This was a story that you did, Adam. Apparently, the one of Rex's co-founders was assembling a consortium to buy Rex last year. But he said that Lim Kim Hai very rudely blocked the takeover. What was this about?
So this is quite interesting, actually. So Michael Jones was one of the. Well, I think he was the original kind of founder of Rex, and essentially Rex was born out of the ashes of it was Hazelton and Kendall. Hazelton and Kendall.
That's it.
That's the one. Yeah. So and so essentially, when Ansett kind of collapsed, those were two of the smaller airlines that were in the kind of the Ansett group. And when it all went wrong, I think the administrator, if I'm right, was speaking to Michael Jones, or he was brought in, and he was kind of like, how do we kind of save this thing? And effectively the decision was made that the main Ansett service probably didn't have a future, but these smaller airlines in regional areas, they were very valuable. And so Michael Jones was one of the people that kind of took these all sort of bundled them together and created Regional Express, which is now known as Rex. He now is a very big figure in the space industry. So he basically is the CEO of Equatorial Launch Australia. And they are basically the biggest kind of space port in Australia. Yes, Australia has spaceports, but still a very big figure in the aerospace industry. It looks like he basically, what I think he was talking about September last year, got a group of investors together and basically said, we think we can make Rex work. And was rebuffed by Lim, and Michael Jones, who's very I love Michael Jones, very outspoken guy, would seem to be echoing the kind of comments about him that John Sharp, the current chairman of Rex, was saying, which is effectively accusing him of being egotistical, I think we could say, which is their opinion, but basically saying that there was, there's been problems there. One of the things that's extraordinary is how this kind of civil war in the boardroom has filtered out. These things don't end up in newspapers by accident. So clearly there was a lot of bad blood there. It seems very sad to me because John Sharp's been at Rex, like 20 years or so now? Long time. And obviously he's been working with Lim, who's the biggest shareholder, I believe, for a long time. Clearly there was problems behind the scenes. What I would say is John Sharp clearly loves Rex. He clearly loves it. He is, I don't think it would be a horrible saying, of an age, elder statesman, but he probably doesn't probably need to work. I'm sure he made quite a bit of money being, his previous career. He clearly just loves it. So it feels like a very sad sort of end.
And I want to stress, we're not commenting, definitively on the conduct of anyone.
No, we don't. We don't. If any lawyers are listening, we don't know. We do not know.
We don't know what's going on inside Rex.
We have no idea.
We're just reporting on what we've heard. We don't want to make any insinuations about anyone's personal conduct.
No.
But clearly Rex has inside Rex's boardroom. There's clearly quite a bit of argy-bargy.
Argy-bargy, great phrase.
Argy-bargy is a great phrase.
Yes.
So on the subject of Rex, the government, we were talking about, slots and the government and the white paper earlier. The government has made it very, very clear that it does not want to see Rex go under. And so the government has actually taken a few steps in recent weeks to kind of ensure that Rex can keep going with these regional flights. Because Rex, as I have noted in a very excellent op-ed that I recently wrote for Australian Aviation magazine, is kind of critical infrastructure to a lot of these regional communities out there. I mean, I think they have something like 41 routes to regional destinations, 21 of which are not served by any other carrier. And so the government is invested in keeping Rex flying so that these vital air links will keep going. And so a couple of things they've done, they've basically given this guarantee that if you book a ticket for a Rex regional flight, and if you have booked one, since the airline went into administration, or for flights that were departing after the airline went into administration, if you've booked one of those tickets, you will fly or you will get your money back.
And that's very smart government. Again, I don't want to sound like some kind of Labour-loving, but this does seem like very smart government because at the moment, people would be very wary of, I would have been very wary of buying a ticket with an airline which is currently in administration.
Yeah.
A lot of people wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and it's an avenue as well that you have to think was not open to Bonza because Bonza wasn't flying at all. If Bonza had kept its planes, then it probably wouldn't have gone into administration. But if Bonza was in administration and had planes, something like that, saying the government, moving into back Bonza flights, would have at least kept up some confidence in people continuing to fly with Bonza. But obviously that's kind of moot because they didn't have any planes. But the other thing that the government has done is that they have essentially, talking of slots, they've come in and they've suspended this use it or lose it 80-20 rule at Sydney Airport. specifically for Rex's regional New South Wales flights, which are a big part of its network. And so they've basically guaranteed that Rex will keep these slots at least until, I think, March next year, while it remains in administration. So the government kind of not, bailing Rex out, and there's no hints yet that the government might take a stake in Rex, as some very clever people have argued that it should. Some very clever, wise, and handsome people have argued that maybe it should.
Yeah.
But there's definitely moves from the government to make sure that Rex passengers are not going to be left in the lurch.
Which is smart. So they're giving them a fighting chance, basically,
Yes.
of being able to find a buyer. The issue they're going to have, well, it does seem to me that Rex, in whatever form, will carry on. It almost has to, because these are, like Jake was saying, kind of critical infrastructure. These towns need those flights, or their economy collapses.
And look at Air Vanuatu. As a point of comparison, Air Vanuatu was, by all accounts, financially a basket case. It was owing, tens of millions of dollars to people, and when the administrators came in, they were kind of saying, we don't actually know how much money it actually owes to people, because these books are a complete schmozzle, right? And so it's suspended these flights, but the administrators, with the backing of the Vanuatu government, or at least with the support of the Vanuatu government, are moving to reinstate these limited number of scheduled Air Vanuatu flights domestically within Vanuatu itself, as opposed to domestically to other countries. Anyway, they've moved to they've got the ATR back in the air. They had some of the Beechcrafts flying around on these scheduled charter flights, because Air Vanuatu is critical infrastructure for people living in Vanuatu. And so there's a comparison here to Rex, because the people of Vanuatu need Air Vanuatu in the same way that the people of regional Australia need Rex.
Yes, it's very like whatever happens, whatever comes out of the wash, it feels very unlikely that these routes will disappear, because they simply can't. We've discussed before that the issue the buyer's going to have is that these Saab aircraft are very, very old, and they're going to need to be replaced. That probably has been put off, and that can's been kicked down the road. But the older an aircraft get, effectively, the more it has to be serviced, the more money it's going to cost you. So they really ideally need somebody to come in that's got big pockets, that can invest in it. Of course, we do not know whether Michael Jones from the Spaceport ELA could potentially come back in. When he was talking about Rex, he said the thing that made it attractive was those 737 flights. And certainly one of the issues Rex will have is that, unlike buying a major airline, which is a kind of statement purchase, it possibly doesn't have the glamour of that. So, and obviously a lot of money is going to be invested in there. It does seem, though, didn't the administrator as well as requested more time?
Which they've been given.
Which does suggest that they think that there's a good chance that we could see a deal.
Well, I mean, we did see that with Bonza as well,
yes,
and that did fall through. But Rex is not Bonza. Rex is still flying. Rex owns its planes. The government is backing Rex in a way that it did not with Bonza, and probably could not with Bonza. So Rex is a longer established name. So it's as I've said in my very brilliant op-ed. I don't think.
All right.
I don't think Rex is going to go the way of Bonza. I think it will survive in some form. The question is who buys it. What's the government's indicated that it wants some say in how Rex operates. What kind of say will that be? What form will it take?
So you now, just on the record, Jake Nelson is backing Rex to make it through this.
It seems unwise for me to do so because of the Australian aviation curse.
Yes.
But I would say more likely than not, Rex is going to survive in some form as we're sitting here now.
I imagine John Sharp and the executives popping open champagne now. They know it's all done. Okay, welcome back. So we have talked about the aviation white paper. We have talked about the ongoing problems at Rex. Jake, what's up next?
Well, on the subject of Rex still, we got some interesting news from Virgin Australia, because Virgin was the first airline to come in and say, in the statement from Rex's administrators. Rex's administrators said Virgin Australia is rebooking passengers for free.
Very interesting.
Qantas and Jetstar have then followed, but Virgin has said, and this is something that they told us pretty much exclusively. They said since the regional airline axed its domestic services, say that 10 times quickly. As of mid-August, they had rebooked around 127,000 Rex flights, which are enough to fill 715 of its 737-800s at full capacity. 30,000 of those rebooked flights had already been taken. Virgin said it fielded around 77,000 online forms and 42,000 phone calls for rebookings.
Which is a very nice gesture, because people can say what they want, but effectively this was done for free.
Yes.
And this meant that people that had booked Rex flights had another option, where otherwise they'd have been in trouble. Has there anybody that benefited from this?
I can think of at least one person.
Is he the guy that wrote that brilliant op-ed that I've heard?
Yeah, no,
about?
it's a very talented, handsome,
yes,
brave,
yes,
courageous, kind.
Wow, it keeps going.
Funny, modest journalist with Australian Aviation has benefited. I have a flight with Virgin that was originally with Rex, but is going down to Melbourne in October.
It would have been a brave move to deny you. I mean, I don't want to feed your ego and make out like you've been this incredibly powerful person in the industry, but it would have been bad if no one had helped you out there. It's one of the perks of the job.
I actually, as soon as I found out that Rex had gone into administration, I went in and rebooked that flight to make sure I got in where I was looking to get in. It's just half an hour after the flight that I was going to take with Rex.
Yeah.
And it was, Virgin was looking to get people on the nearest available flight. But what was funny was that the email that I got, confirming that they'd refunded that they'd received my request was still said Bonza rather than Rex. So that was kind of a funny moment. But it's good on Virgin.
Yeah.
This is you have to think that and another thing, this is a lot of people who were looking to fly with Rex.
Yeah.
127,000 rebookings with Virgin alone. You have to wonder how many Qantas and Jetstar were getting. Enough to fill, as Virgin said, 715 737-800s at full capacity.
Which also shows as well whether or not it was financially financially viable. People were booking those flights.
Much
like with Bonza. The actual thing was working.
And with more marketing, and with more promotion, and more getting the word out that Rex was also doing these flights, maybe more people would have booked the flights. You'd have to think, because we've spoken on the podcast before. There was not a lot of advertising around these that we saw. Not a lot of marketing. We saw that marketing campaign about a week before Rex went into administration.
They were basically relying on word of mouth, or they were relying on their loyal customers. And that will count for a lot. Obviously, it led to a lot of seats. But if you want to compete against Virgin and Qantas, you need to spend a lot of money on marketing, at least initially, to get the word out there, because tragically, some people, unlike us, are not aviation aficionados, and a lot of people weren't even aware that Rex were doing this. They were also expanding their network quite a lot as well. So even though they started these capital city flights, I think it was March 2021, in reality, that it took a long time for their network to grow. So I think a lot of people just weren't aware. Michael Jones at ELA, he said that was the attraction for somebody to come in and buy Rex. You never know. It could well be the case that if Rex does continue, somebody does also keep limited 737 flights if they can get hold of the planes. It doesn't necessarily have to be over forever.
Qantas is looking to do a fleet renewal, and you have to wonder how many former Qantas 737-800s
are going to be knocking about.
Are going to be hitting the mark. A great point that I made in my excellent op-ed.
Oh, not this again.
So on the subject of Virgin and regional flights, this is a much better segue.
Yeah,
Adam. This is a much better segue than the one we had before into the. But we had some news a couple of weeks ago that Virgin has made a decision on its Fokker 100s. You may recall that Virgin was planning to replace these VARA planes that were getting pretty long in the tooth out west. These Fokker 100s that they've had for ages. They were looking to replace them with either the Airbus Airbus Air 220, the Airbus A220, or the Embraer E190 E2. And we found out a couple of weeks ago they had made the decision to pick the E2.
Did any pundit or aviation journalist in any way float that idea in advance?
I have heard.
Yes.
That maybe there was one or two. I'm not going to name them.
Yeah.
But let's just say they're right about a lot of things.
Wow. Okay.
They've picked these second generation E-jets. They're going to be getting them from the second half of 2025. They're getting eight of the E-jets to replace these 4 Fokker 100s, which are about 30 years old on average. Virgin's going to be basing them in Perth, and these will, by the way, be the first E2s to be operated by a major airline group in Australia. We do have a bunch of original E190s kicking around with Qantas and Qantas Lincoln Alliance and NJE, but these are the first E2s that Australia will be seeing. They're going to have 2x2 seating. 6 hours flying range, and they will be the first new aircraft in the WA charter market this century when they come into service from October next year. These 2x2 seating is interesting, Adam, because I've seen it being used as a selling point. Scoot, the Singaporean low-cost carrier, has been advertising its E2s for kind of like little short and medium haul flights into Southeast Asia from Singapore. And one selling point that they've been putting forward to the E2s is no middle seat. Everyone hates the middle seat. Nobody likes sitting in the middle seat. If you book a seat on one of our fantastic new E2s, there's no middle seat. There's the window in the aisle, and you don't have to squash in between two people. So that's a selling point that Scoot is using. So these E2s. Jane Herdlichka, the CEO of Virgin Australia, she said that they're the most fuel-efficient aircraft in the segment. They're going to cut emissions by 30% compared to the Fokker 100s. Lower purring profiles from these Sky Kittens, and enhanced passenger comfort. She says that they will predominantly operate charter flights for VARA. And she said it's a huge vote of confidence by Virgin Australia in the charter business in the WA market. I think there's probably a couple of reasons as well why they've picked the E2 over the A220. From what I understand, the E2s are better suited to the environment that they'll be operating in Western Australia. And it's likely that they probably are also just going to get the E2s sooner, because Airbus has a big backlog for the A220. Qantas has got 3 of them now, but I believe there's pretty substantial orders on the books for the A220, whereas the E2 has a much shorter backlog and will be available and flying sooner, so Virgin can start phasing out these Fokker 100 sooner. Oh, good news. Right, we've got time for one more story, I think. Dealer's choice. Jake, what shall we discuss? One more story. Only one more. We can't do one, and then I'm going to wrap up the show and you jump on me. The tension is huge, is escalating. It is huge, Adam, and I think it's shocking, frankly, that we haven't talked about Western Sydney Airport's first international carrier. Yes, which we should have basically spoken about at the start of the show. So that was a huge blunder on our part. Yes, it was a huge blunder. So, as you will know, Western Sydney International, as it's now called, at Badgerys Creek, is due to open in late 2026. They've already previously announced that Qantas would be the first kind of domestic airline confirmed to fly there. They have alongside Jetstar. Alongside Jetstar, of course. They've now announced their first international airline that's going to fly there, which is, drumroll, Singapore Airlines. Hey. Singapore Airlines. This was announced officially this morning. Tuesday morning, as we're sitting here. They are going to be. They will be flying when it opens in 2026, non-stop to Singapore Changi Airport. This is just these mainline Singapore Airlines passenger services at the moment. Does not yet include Scoot or Singapore Cargo. But Simon Hickey, the CEO of WSI, has said, it's a fantastic milestone for Western Sydney. really pushing as well this 24-hour airport angle, which Sydney Kingsford Smith can't do because of the curfew.
Yeah, and we'll never be able to do.
You can have, late night flights to Singapore Changi Airport from Western Sydney. Finish up your business in Sydney in the evening, hop on a plane, be in Changi to be at your next business meeting in the morning. He's told us. It's a major boost for slots in the peaks. Singapore engaged with them, wanted to be the first international airline to announce that they were coming to WSI. And, this is coming as WSI is hitting some pretty major milestones. I mean, it's finished its terminal roof. So they're now moving on to internal fit-outs, and Simon Hickey has told us airport is 80% finished, ready for operational testing. He said they're putting detailed operational plans together. They've got procedures that they've written. They're starting to get their test regime together. He said we're turning on the bag system. We're putting bags down there. We're making sure that that's working effectively. He said there's a big regime of testing to make sure that the airport's ready to go in 2 years.
It's very interesting because they seem very confident that this will launch in 2026. So firstly, they are saying explicitly they're going to hit the target. But if it looked like it was in some way in doubt, it's at this point you would start slipping in the kinds of seeds of doubt. There doesn't seem to be any of that. They seem very, very, very confident now this thing is going to happen.
And they're in talks with more airlines to get going and to get flying into Western Sydney. Now, Western Sydney is going to be considered a primary gateway into Australia, which I think sort of puts it on the same level as Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth. So airlines like Qatar may still be constrained by the existing bilaterals, the bilateral air services agreements. But if we get more open skies agreements, we can get more international carriers flying into Western Sydney Airport, which will as well take even more of the pressure off of Kingsford Smith.
Yeah, you would think as well that those kind of open skies agreements will happen nearer to when it opens, because there is now, or there will be in 2026, suddenly lots of capacity, lots of new capacity that didn't exist before. If you want to, and Jake, you interviewed Simon Hickey, didn't you?
I did.
On the phone. If you want to meet the great man himself and ask him a question about Western Sydney, you can. Where? At the Australian Aviation Summit.
And if you want to have a deeper and more comprehensive dive into the aviation white paper with guest speakers from the TWU, from Google Wing, from Virgin Australia, you can come to the aviation white paper panel where we will be breaking it all down.
And who's hosting that panel, Jake?
Well, I think no, don't tell me.
No.
I think we're leaving it a surprise,
okay,
Adam, but let's just say it's me.
It's just you. Right, on that note, we do have to wrap up the show. We will be back here the same time next week, or of course come to the Australian Aviation Summit. Jake, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And we'll be back the same time next week, as I said before, but for now, for us, goodbye.
Goodbye.